Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the MetaStellar YouTube channel. My name is Maria KOROLOV. I'm the editor here at MetaStellar. And are you looking for some free science fiction and fantasy books to get you through this weekend? We've got them. Today, we've got an epic dragon, mysterious computer messages, sexy aliens, and the #1 book is a cyberpunk detective story set in the first human space colony. But before we get to that, I want to thank reviews editor Kristen Noland and community members E.S. Foster, Tim McHugh, and NC Nabertovsky for helping us out with the reviews. And E.S. Foster, or Emma, is here with us today. Hi, Emma.
Hi.
I want to remind everybody to get the books while they're still free. Today is March 15th, and there's no telling how much longer the books will stay free. Authors and publishers make them free as a promotion to get people interested in the rest of the series. So it could last a day, could last a handful of days. Jump on it. If there's a book that you want, jump on it. Now, some of these books, if you're watching later, might be free again or might still be free. Some of them might be in Kindle Unlimited. That's where you pay $12 a month and you read all the books you want. And we will tell you if a book is in Kindle Unlimited. Now, you can subscribe to this channel to get this video every Friday afternoon so you don't miss anything. We also have a newsletter that comes out every Friday at 5 p.m. and you can subscribe to that as well. The link is in the email below. Because every single Friday, the team here at MetaStellar reads the first few chapters of the top 5 books on Amazon's free sci-fi and fantasy list. The link to the article and to all the books is in the description box below. For those who are new, MetaStellar is an online magazine of speculative fiction. All the content is always free to our readers. We publish original short fiction, reprints, excerpts, essays, and lots of book reviews. We're able to do this and keep all content completely free thanks to our Patreon supporters. We're currently in the middle of our spring 2024 submission cycle, so if you have a sci-fi, fantasy, or horror short story, we do pay 8 cents a word, and the link to that is in the description box below as well. And we have an update from last week's list. I read the book Inception by KJ Gyllenwater, which was reviewed by Melody. I loved her reviews, so I went and read the book. And I have since downloaded the second book because I finished the first one, loved it. And the author herself got in touch with us because Melody pointed out a continuity error in the book, and she fixed the error. So thanks, Melody, for catching that. And also the book, another one of the books that I reviewed, Pippa DaCosta's Betrayal. I've also finished it, and I've actually paid my own money for the second book in the series. G. Gockel, a sci-fi writer, has put together a list of 100 free sci-fi books in all the major sci-fi genres that are all free today and tomorrow, March 16th. And the link is in the description box below to that list. I've already downloaded a ton of those books because I am a huge fan of free sci-fi and of promoting indie authors. So check that out as well. The link is in this description box below. Okay, so let's get into the first book. Let me pull that up. Here you go. Wellsville by L.C. Scott. It's a standalone, young adult, dystopian, slow burn romance kind of novel. And it's the author's first time on our Free Friday list. And so I am not the target audience for this book. I don't like the words dystopian or young adult or romance. They're all like red flags to me. Also slow burn. I'm old and I have no patience for all the romantic hijinks of kids these days. And what with like the world being the way it is, I want my escapist reading to be a little bit more escapist and less like our current dystopian reality. Okay, so that said, let's get into the book. So Wellsville opens up in a schoolyard during recess, but instead of being loud and full of activity, all the kids are passed out on the ground. The only kid still awake is Colby, and he worries that he's going to be blamed for everything. And he's still awake because he was somehow protected. And it starts to rain, and he carries one of the girls inside, the pretty one, the one he's got a crush on. And inside the school, everybody else is passed out too. All the students, teachers, office ladies, everybody's out, unconscious. But he hears somebody moving around in the library. And he goes there carrying the pretty girl, and it's one of the other students, Priya. And she sees Colby, she sees him carrying the pretty girl. She immediately jumps to the worst conclusions. And she also thinks that he's somehow responsible for what happened because he's got a bit of a bad boy reputation. Then in the next chapter, we jump back in time to what seems like the morning of that same day. Priya's at work serving coffee. Colby's pretty crush is there too. Priya's talking to her, they're friends. And Priya's been having nightmares about shadowy figures looming over her. And she's talking about this. Colby walks by, the pretty girl waves at him. And then we jump forward to school. Priya's having trouble staying awake because of all those nightmares. And her friend suggests that she go take a nap in the library, which is what she does. She finds a quiet corner and falls asleep, and the nightmares come back again. Then when she wakes up, it's completely quiet. She walks back out through the stacks and discovers that everyone is in the library out cold. And then she sees Colby carrying in a pretty girl and suspects him of the worst. Then we jump to the point of view of a third kid, Liam, who's a computer nerd who's been getting a weird message over the computer with that day's date and time and a warning to eat frangipani for protection. And frangipanis are a type of flower, so he went and he got those flowers and he's been popping them all day just in case. Because I guess he believes everything he reads on the computer. And then Liam goes to the computer lab where he's copying some files over from floppy disks. So this is the early days of the World Wide Web. He's carrying floppy disks. So this kind of set in the past. And then Colby comes in, sees Liam in the computer lab. They argue about stuff. Colby sees the warning on the computer screen about eating frangipanis. And as the clock ticks down to the deadline, Colby kind of gives in and eats one of those flowers. And then the deadline passes and nothing seems to happen. And so he leaves, and Liam stays in the computer lab by himself. Then a few minutes later, he gets another message over the computer. And the message says to stay hidden, follow the conscious, and find the island. At which point he leaves the lab and discovers that everyone is passed out. He can't wake people up, hears noises from the library, goes to the library and finds the other kids. So it is a promising start. There's a lot of tension building up. I'm not a fan of the genre, and the characters don't really grab me, so I don't think I'm going to be sticking with the book. But I think people who like Stranger Things might enjoy this. And then I cheated, and I went and I read the description of the book, and apparently there's bigger mysteries, and maybe the story is not set in the past after all, which is kind of starting to sound more intriguing. So maybe I'll read a little bit further, see what happens. All right, next we have Loving Captivity by R.K. Munin, the first of 6 books in the Human Pets of Talon, an Enemies to Lovers romance series. The other books are $4 each, and they are in Kindle Unlimited. This is the author's 3rd time on a Free Friday list. And so again, I'm predisposed to hate this book just by looking at the cover. I don't like it when humans are pets. I don't like alien romance. I don't like naked chests on the cover. I mean, all these are red flags for me because, like I said, I have a cold, cold heart. But people do love this genre. And so I started reading. And the alien's named Sharon, or maybe Siren. And he goes to a slave auction and he buys Sora, a human. And she has spent the previous 10 years with an abusive master after being sold into slavery at age 16. So already I'm getting creeped out. And so Sora doesn't have any particular skills. She's covered with bruises. Nobody wants to buy her. A brothel owner plans to wait for the price to drop so he can snap her up cheap and work her to death. Then we switch to Siren's point of view. He has a friend with a human pet, and he likes cuddling with that human pet. And he doesn't have his own human pet. His mother has one. Apparently everybody has a human pet except for him. And his friend suggests that maybe Siren get his own pet human. So, I mean, it is readable. So if you like these tropes, it's a very readable story and you might enjoy it. I'm creeped out by the whole premise. So yeah, I'm not gonna stick with it. Okay, moving on. The Curse of the Dragon's Eye by Eoghan Cunningham? Yvonne Cunningham? Eoghan? I don't know how to pronounce that. Sorry, E.R. Cunningham. This is the first of 5 books in the Crystalline Dragon Saga, a fantasy adventure series. The other books are $5 each, and they are in Kindle Unlimited. But only the second book is out. Books 3 through 5 are coming out this April, May, and June, and you can pre-order them. And E.S. Foster read this for us. So Emma, what did you think of this book?
Yeah, so to start out with, I really enjoy epic fantasy, so I was super excited to get to read this. The story takes place in this world called Udalara, and in this particular area of this mysterious fantasy country, there is a young man named Dusk, and he has been in slavery in salt mines for about 10 years. The end of his 10 years are almost up. And like Maxon, a guard, he comes up. He seems to know him pretty well, but obviously it's like a slave thing. So he doesn't really acknowledge him, but he says, "Hey, I know your 10 years with us are almost up. Be prepared to get bought out to somebody else so that you can be the like slave laborer for them." So his future, Dust's future, doesn't look all that great. And at some point in the first chapter, this cocky young teenager who's probably like 15, 16, he shows up. He's another person who's been sold into slavery. It turns out he was caught stealing food off the streets. He was just living off the streets. And they were like, okay, well, we're gonna have you work in the salt mines, and Dusk is gonna be the one to train you what to do as your like as Dusk's replacement because he needs to leave. So at first, this boy, whom they're referring to as Nine, because all the slaves don't use their actual names, they have to use code names. At first, he's like, "No, I'm going to get out of here. I don't belong here. It's gonna be easy to escape. It's not that bad." Dusk, on the other hand, he's experienced a lot of the trauma from slavery, a lot of the beatings and everything. He says, "Look, don't try to escape. Just stick with me, keep your head down, and then maybe you'll be able to survive for a little bit longer." So in the end, like Nine and Dusk, they sort of become friends. It's more like a partnership type thing. And so they continue working in the mines. Eventually, though, Dusk and Nine are digging around like they're supposed to in the salt mines, and they come across this mysterious cavern. So first, nobody is like, "Hey, don't go down there because, it might be like 30 feet deep and you could fall down there and die." So obviously, Nine is immediately like, "Oh, well, I kind of want to go down there and see what's happening." So they sneak down there and they find gigantic remains of a dragon skeleton. So in this world, dragons have been extinct for thousands of years, and they were the only creatures who had magic, so all the magic has died out with them. So when they're looking at this skeleton, Dusk sees this mysterious gigantic gem, and it looks like it was part of the dragon's eye. Hence the title, I'm assuming. So in order, he thinks that this is valuable, so he immediately thinks, well, if I could buy my freedom with this gem, yeah, I'm gonna do it. So he steals the gem. The only problem is, upon touching it, the gem fuses to his skin. The good thing is, it gives him some type of fire power, and he uses that to escape from the salt mines to slavery. But it doesn't end there. He needs to escape into the neighboring country because in Udalara, this part, he's still considered a slave. So Dusk and Nine eventually bring the magic back to the world in this way, but now they're being hunted by mysterious forces, and the rest of the book promises that there's going to be a lot of action, adventure, and mystery. And I really enjoyed this because I'm a huge fan of epic fantasy. So not only was I super interested in like the little bits of info that were dotted around here and there, but I was also interested in like Dusk, his perspective, what it was like living in that world for him. And I was really excited that he was so early going to be able to leave this part of this like desperate world and go out and explore all this world that I wanted to learn so much about. So if you're a fan of epic fantasy and you want to explore rich world building without too much info dumping or anything like that, I would definitely recommend this, especially since the rest of the series is coming out.
All right, thank you. Okay, let's move on to book number 2 on today's list. Let me make that a little bit bigger for you guys. It's Fire on the Mountain by Saul Tanpepper. Saul Tanpepper. Get it? Ha ha ha. Anyway, this is the first of 4 books in the Scorched Earth, a climate disaster survival series. The other books are $5 each, and they're not in Kindle Unlimited. Tim McHugh read this for us, but since he's not here, Emma's going to tell us what he thought about it. So, Emma, what did Tim have to say?
Yeah, so Tim says like this book starts out as a survival story, and it centers on an army veteran named Xander. He's a convicted murderer. He ends up in this prison, and it's kind of like an apocalyptic thriller type thing, which Tim says like that's not really his thing, but he was going to read the story, figure out what it was all about. And he says that at some point, Xander, when he is preparing for his parole hearing, he ends up finding out that there's like a bunch of killers who are locked up in this prison, and they start a riot because they're like he's called it a sweltering furnace of a prison. The heat is breaking down their cooling systems, so he has to help deal with this prison break just as his parole hearing is coming about. So obviously that's not too great for him. And Tim also says Xander does make it to his parole hearing after all of that. And we get to meet his brother at that point. We learn about his past, their family dynamics. Tim says that Xander is desperately clinging to his innocence while everyone around him has seemingly given up on him. So immediately, even though I haven't read this book, it gives me hope for this character. It feels like, maybe if he's a convicted murderer, he might not be all that bad of a character. You know, he's got some layers to him, some complications. So eventually, before his parole hearing starts, another disaster happens that a wildfire has broken out near the prison, which Tim says that seems to be the inciting incident. Eventually, Xander eventually discovers this young girl during the time of the wildfire and seems like they're going to have a great adventure together, but Tim says that's where he stopped reading. He says the author is clearly a professional writer who knows how to set up a plot. But he said there were times when there were pages of backstory that would pull me out of the plot. He says it doesn't necessarily seem like info dumps, but some people like to know exactly what is happening and want to be caught up, but he prefers to be in the dark and learn as you go. So that was his personal preference. So yeah, he says if you like a few corny metaphors about matches and tinder boxes and you like apocalyptic thrillers and things like that, this kind of reminds me of like The Last of Us. He said, yeah, go ahead and check it out. It's not his preferred style or genre, but it's still definitely worth that read.
Okay, so before we go on to book number 1 on today's list, I want to thank our Patreon supporters. All the money donated goes to pay for original fiction because the entire tutorial team is all volunteer. You can also support us by purchasing our anthologies, and we also have merch like cups and mugs and notepads and t-shirts and stuff like that. So we really appreciate it. Like I said, all the donations go to pay for original fiction. And now let's go on to book number 1 on today's list. The title is Colony 1. It's by Tarah Benner. It's the first of 5 books in the Eldaron Chronicles, a science fiction adventure series. The other books are $5 to $6 each, and they're not in Kindle Unlimited. Nick Nerbatovsky read this for us. Well, let me make that cover a little bit bigger for you so you guys can see it. Okay, here it is. Nick NC Nerbatovsky read this for us, but Nick's not here with us today. So again, Emma is going to tell you about this book. Emma, what did Nick have to say?
So he starts out by saying that this is like a gritty near future action story. Starts off with a former soldier named John Wyatt. He takes a gamble in the Space Force where he's hired to lead a crack team of space commandos. So immediately I'm thinking Space Force, that sounds familiar, you know? It says that in reality, this group who is supposed to be, leading the space force to this new colony, they're actually computer specialists and white hat hackers, as well as an investigative journalist thrown in for good measure. So Jonah is trying to make a successful military career for himself. But now it feels like he's just stuck with all of these people who are low-key criminals, and he's never going to have that chance, even though they're stationed on Eldaron, which is actually the first human space colony. But While they're there in that space colony, one of the team members gets an anonymous tip that something is wrong with the life, but just as she starts trying to figure it out, Jonah finds evidence of an impending sabotage. And this is where Nick says things start to get interesting. He says it's full of information technology and Norse language. He says that the author pens a fast-paced tale of espionage and intrigue that has a small share of action. Her characters, while each are individual, evoke a sense of pain, of reality, without wallowing in self-pity, which is great, obviously. And he says the world building is strong. She manages to bring the flavor of iconic modern locations like New York and entirely believable versions of the future. So there's a lot going on with the story, but in a way that makes it believable, makes it like cool, real, almost like realistic. Like it's something that could happen in our own future, but in a good way. So he says if you enjoy fast-paced thrillers, cyberpunk flair, then you'll enjoy diving into Colony One.
Thanks, Emma. So if you're interested in any of these books, follow the links in the description box below, and also check out the list of 100 free sci-fi novels. That link is also below, and I'm also going to put that in the first pinned comment as well, so it's easier to find. And if you're intrigued in the books from last week's Free Friday, the link to all the Free Fridays is in the description box below as well, or you can just pull it up from the MetaStellar YouTube channel. All right, thanks everybody. We'll see you all next Friday. Hope you have a great weekend and happy reading.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye, everybody.